One of, if not the best center in the 2025 class is about to commit to the Kentucky Wildcats.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be discussing Malachi Moreno announcing a commitment tomorrow. Looks like the Wildcats are in phenomenal position with the four-star center. Going to break down his game, going to break down the latest on his recruitment. Very, very close to an announcement from Moreno. Believe he's going to end up being a Kentucky Wildcat. Also on today's episode, going to kind of touch on this, play off of the potential commitment that Kentucky may be getting tomorrow. I think that Mark Pope needs to make a statement with next year's class. And no, it doesn't necessarily have to be the most important thing for next year's roster, but it needs to be a building block, and I want to explain why. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. And if you are watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribed to the show. And if you are listening on podcast, I would also appreciate it if you subscribed there as well. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. Malachi Moreno, a four-star center. We've talked about him here quite a bit on the show. He is announcing a commitment tomorrow, August 16th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. The 7-foot rising senior out of Great Crossing, Kentucky, will choose between his final 8 schools, and I'll go through them here with you. The Arkansas Razorbacks, Indiana Hoosiers, Iowa Hawkeyes, Kentucky Wildcats, Louisville Cardinals, North Carolina Tar Heels, Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and Ohio State Buckeyes. According to On3's top 150 player ratings, Moreno is the number 21 overall player in the class. He's also the number 21 player number 1 player in the state of Kentucky, according to KSR. If you look on 24/7 Sports, they've got him ranked number 26th nationally. ESPN has him 37th and the number 4 center in the class, and Rivals has him rated as the 24th overall player, number 2 center in the 2025 class. If I'm not mistaken, there was a center in front of him that actually reclassified recently, and that made him the top center player at his position, I should say, for this 25 class. We had Jacob Goins, host of Locked On Hoosiers, on the show just about a week and a half or so ago to kind of break down the Indiana perspective from this recruitment, and it looks like Indiana is the second team here in the running for Moreno's services. I think Goins would agree with this as well, that Kentucky is going to be the favorite, and they are the favorite to land him tomorrow morning, according to On3's RPM recruiting prediction machine. The Wildcats have a 91.8% chance to land him, and on 24/7 Sports, Travis Branham, if I'm not mistaken, put in a crystal ball for Kentucky to land him. In fact, multiple different 24/7 Sports writers have put in crystal balls for Kentucky to land Moreno. That'd be 4 crystal balls, all with them with a pretty high expectation of Moreno landing. So this is more than likely going to be the first big commitment, the first commitment of Mark Pope's time here with the Kentucky Wildcats. And I'll just go ahead and say this: getting the best player at his position in your first recruiting class is not bad at all. There are a lot of detractors that want to go out there and criticize Pope for having not done anything on the recruiting trail when he went out and got 12 players to come to his team in the span of about a month and a half for this upcoming season. And the goal right now is to get those guys ready and capable of playing together, build that chemistry for this 24-25 schedule. Obviously, recruiting is going to be extremely important. I'm going to explain why this year's class is really important later on in the show. But I completely understand if Kentucky doesn't pick things up, so to speak, until mid-season, until late season, early 2025, sometime before March Madness. I would not be shocked if Kentucky doesn't make major moves until that time period. Why? Because Kentucky is trying to focus on the now. Mark Pope has made this very, very clear throughout the time, or throughout the conversations that we've been having this offseason. We want to win championships now. We understand the assignment. We understand the expectations. We want to win titles. We're supposed to bring home banners, not just banners for the national tournament, but for the SEC tournament as well. Malachi Moreno, a 7-foot, 210-pound center, again, out of Great Crossing here in the state of Kentucky. Really solid player. And whenever I say really solid player, I don't mean that generically. If you go and watch his film, you go and watch what scouts have to say about him, you listen to this show, you'll note that he's pretty good at essentially everything you would want a big man to be good at. He's a really good rebounder. On top of that, he's a really good defender on both ends of the floor. He grabs rebounds. He's really, really good at timing with putbacks and such. You can see that in his highlight tapes. He's a really good defender around the rim, not just blocking shots, but also affecting shots. He's a really solid rim scorer as well. Not crazy elite, but very solid. He has a ton of moves that he can go to inside the paint, and it allows him to finish in a variety of ways. On3, in their scouting report, said that there's a lot here with Moreno that translates to college. However, he still has room to improve. And I'd agree with that. I think that Moreno does have room to improve here. For instance, I think that if he wants to develop into a Mark Pope style big, you also have to really put a focus on your passing. You have to put a focus on maybe stepping outside of the paint and getting comfortable with maybe a mid-range or possibly an outside shot. We've discussed this kid on the show before, and I'm going to go through the points that I've made. He looks and reminds me of a very good player currently in the SEC, and I think that there's a lot of potential here. So sure, there's a baseline, there's a ceiling, or excuse me, there's a floor, there's a high floor, and we don't necessarily know what the ceiling is quite yet. There are a couple of things that we can criticize. I think he may be a little small in terms of weight for his position, unless he wants to play the 4, in which case you would have to develop, again, more versatile tendencies offensively. So much here to be really excited about when you watch this kid play. Just go and watch. We can't show the film on the channel, but just go and watch. There's like a 25, 30-minute highlight reel of him out there. Solid in the post. Really, really good on both sides of the ball. Anticipates when shots are put up, anticipates where to go for misses, cleans things up, aggressive when he needs to be. That's another note that I have here, because in some of the tape, Moreno it's not a lack of energy. It's just fluid. It's smooth. It's polished. It's up, layup, boom. Go up for a rebound, layup, boom. Get the ball in the post, make a move, layup, boom. And then you'll go see another YouTube video of Moreno, and it's him just throwing down the ball, dunking as aggressively as he possibly can at 7 foot, 210, 215 pounds. Like multiple times, like back to back to back. You give him an opportunity on the baseline, you're not going to contest with him. He's going to go over you and he's going to throw the ball down. I love this prospect, potentially as a first pickup for Mark Pope. I think he's about to commit to Kentucky. A lot of people would seem to agree. Indiana in a what feels like distant second. I would be very surprised if he ended up choosing anybody besides the Wildcats or the Hoosiers tomorrow. Again, top 30 prospect. 4-star. May end up being a 5-star by the time all is said and done. He's got a senior season with Great Crossing. We've talked about the things outside of basketball that I really like about this kid on the show. He talked about how he's really looking for a place where he can grow his faith, He said to grow as a player, grow my faith, grow as a person, and be in a family-type environment. I like versatility, but at the end of the day, I just want to win. Making sure my team has more points on the board than the other team. Whatever I need to do to make that happen, that's all I want to do. I like the way that this kid approaches the game. I like the way he plays it. It's very easy to see if you go and read what this kid has had to say, if you go watch how he plays and you see how Mark Pope coaches and who he is as a person, how these two could very quickly mesh together. I'm glad that this recruitment is kind of ending here now. I hope that Kentucky picks him up tomorrow. Again, I'm talking as if they're going to get him. I'm happy for Pope. I'm happy that he's able to kind of step out there and go get a player that is similar to him, that can relate to him in a variety of ways. Both played the same position, both have the same values, both are looking to do the same thing at this program. I'm excited for Moreno if he ends up choosing Kentucky, and even if he doesn't, if he ends up going to Indiana or elsewhere, I'm going to be excited to see this kid play. I think he's going to be special. Let's continue to talk about this. Let's take a look at maybe some players that I would compare him to, and then I want to kind of talk about the emphasis that Kentucky needs to put on this year's 2025 class, not necessarily in terms of volume, but in terms of star power. Before we dive into that, though, I do want to tell you guys about our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, and they are the place, the only place that you need to go get your Major League Baseball tickets, as well as any kind of sporting event. You can go there for tickets. I loved using Game Time for college football games last year. I've been using them for MLB games this season. It's also not just sports. It's also comedy, theater, concerts, any event near you. Game Time's got a ticket for it, and specifically for MLB games, it's really awesome to use Game Time because tickets actually, the prices, they go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and then their lowest price guarantee. They take the guesswork out of buying your tickets, and you can take the guesswork out of buying your MLB tickets over at Game Time by downloading the Game Time app, creating an account, and using code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, continuing along here on the Thursday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you again. I really appreciate you guys checking out the show today. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, I would greatly appreciate it if you did so. Talking about Malachi Moreno, a four-star center, number one center in the 2025 class. Will be announcing his commitment tomorrow again at 11 a.m. Eastern. I think the Wildcats are going to get him. I'm super, super excited about what he could potentially bring to the table because, and we talked about this a little bit on the show before, probably going to touch on it a few more times again before he actually suits up. I see an All-American in Malachi Moreno. And this is not me trying to be hot takey. This is not me trying to just say something just to say something. I have thought this ever since I put on his first highlight reel that I watched on YouTube. There is a player in the SEC right now that has a very similar trajectory to what we could end up seeing with Moreno. I'm going to pull up Ken Palm here because I've done this before. I'm going to do it again. All-American center Johni Broome currently plays for the Auburn Tigers. When he got to college, he played for Morehead State at 6'10", 235 pounds as a freshman. He did a little bit of everything. He was, in terms of shots, in terms of percentage of possessions used, one of the most utilized players in the country. He took 29.8% of the shots that went up when he was on the floor for Morehead State. That was 82nd nationally. He had a true shooting percentage inside the top 300. His offensive rebound percentage was top 25 nationally. His defensive rebound percentage was top 40. He was top 50 in block percentage. He was solid in free throw rate. He was really solid inside the arc, and he didn't take a single three-pointer. Malachi Moreno right now is a good rebounder, is a good scorer, and is a good defender. I could very easily see, if he gets minutes early, him having a very similar stat line to Johni Broome early on in his career. Now, as it develops, things get more interesting here with Broome. In his second season with the Morehead State, I believe Eagles, if I'm not mistaken, he took 33.6% of the shots when he was on the floor. That was 12th nationally. He was top 400 in true shooting percentage. Top 50 in offensive rebound, top 25 in defensive rebound. He was top 10 in block percentage. And he was number 1 in the country in conference-only block percentage. He was also number 1 in the country in percentage of possessions and percentage of shots in conference. He was top 5 in the country when it came to FD 40, which was a really interesting statistic about free throws that we could dive into here another day. But it's not relevant to our conversation here. He was top 400 in percentage inside the arc. He was top 16 in the country in conference-only 2-point percentage. Really good stuff. 6'10", 235-pound sophomore at that point. Then he transfers to Auburn. And you see some similar stats. 28.8% of shots. Top 100 in offensive and defensive rebound percentage. Obviously, things are more difficult in the SEC, so some of these numbers went down. Top 16 in block percentage. Still really good in FD 40. Really good inside the arc from a percentage perspective, efficiency. And then the interesting thing, all of a sudden, Auburn started encouraging him to shoot threes. He went 9 of 31 on the year. It's good for 29%. So he went from no threes in his freshman year, 5 threes in his sophomore season, 0 of 5 from beyond the arc, 9 of 31 in his junior year with the Auburn Tigers. To now his senior season, all of the stats are similar. He's really good in block percentage. He actually, just his assist rate skyrocketed from 11.9% to 18.9%. He was one of the most dominant players in terms of possessions used. He was top 4 nationally in conference only in shots and possessions. Number 1 in the country in defensive rebound percentage in conference. Really, really good in true shooting. Actually, it's his best true shooting percentage so far of his career at 59.5%. He shot 59.6% inside the arc, 56% in conference. That was 18th nationally. Really good stuff. Like really good stuff. He had a low turnover rate. That was one of the best marks nationally. And then you look at the three-point percentage, 28 of 79. He took 79 three-pointers after taking a combined 5 over his first 3 seasons and a combined 36. Combined 5 over his first 2 seasons, 36 over his first 3. Shot 35.4%. That's good. That's really good for a 6'10" center. And he shot 41.5% in conference play. It's extremely efficient for a 6'10" player. I can see Moreno having a very similar trajectory to this, where across the board, he is good nationally to some degree in every category he could be. Rebounding, defending, true shooting, amount of possessions used, especially if he's able to become more of a passer, which I think he could be. And then as the years go on, you'd begin to develop, train, and create that outside shot. By the time you finish college, you're do all big. You can do everything to some extent. It's on the scouting report right now, and I'll say it again. There's a lot of things to like heading into college. A lot of things translate very well. But he's got to be able to work and improve on those things, strengthen those things, if he wants to add other aspects to his game. I believe Moreno can. If Kentucky ends up getting Moreno, if this is where we're at, like Kentucky ends up getting him first or number 1 overall center, first commitment in Mark Pope's of Mark Pope's Kentucky career. First of all, it's a great pickup. I think it's phenomenal. You have to start laying the foundation for your future teams with this year's class. And I've said this probably too much on the show, but I'm going to reiterate it here again. Programs like UConn have built their identity off of recruiting. And you may say, it's weird. Why would you say that? Kentucky's built their identity off of recruiting, and they still can't win in the tournament. The difference between what Kentucky does and what UConn does is UConn develops players over the span of years. Kentucky has one-and-dones that get in, play a season, have a bunch of highlights, have fun, get the fan base excited, and then they're out. UConn has been able to maintain some consistency with the players that they have brought into their program. By the time they're seniors or they're juniors that are really, really good, that are important aspects to the team. And I'm not saying this is the case for every single position, right? This is just what has stood out to me that's been really important for them. UConn has got, by the time the seniors graduate, by the time the sophomores or juniors declare for the draft, right? You already have sitting behind them some pieces that you can get excited about that are next up, that were maybe freshmen or sophomores. Let's look at last year's roster, for instance. Donovan Clingan was a sophomore. He was in his second season at UConn. He came back, he blossomed, and he was incredible. At the small forward position, you had your one and done. You had your 5-star Stephon Castle. Now, was he the most efficient player? No, not necessarily, especially from outside the arc, but he was good for their system. Alex Caravan was a sophomore. Cam Spencer was a 5th-year senior. He's experienced. Tristan Newton had been at UConn for 2 years. He had been at East Carolina for 3 before that. They bring guys in, and when you look at their depth, you start to realize, hey, these are guys that have been really important to this program for multiple seasons, and when they get up, and then whenever they're ready to play, they're ready to start, they're ready to contribute even more, by the time next season rolls around, they'll be ready, and they'll be good. Take Samson Johnson, for instance, the backup center for UConn. He's heading into his senior season. 6'10", 225 pounds, solid player. One of the nation's best true shooting percentages. If you just take away volume, he shot 73.5% from inside the arc. 100 of 136 shots. He's gonna be like you have to respect what Dan Hurley and company have done over there. And then you've got guys like Jalen Stewart, who are going to be ready to step up this year. Solomon Ball, if I'm not mistaken, is still there, who was a freshman last year. You don't just build a program overnight, right? It takes several years. And Dan Hurley saw that process. In his first year with UConn, they were sub 500, 16-17, then 19-12, then 15-8 during the COVID year, post-COVID year, then 23-10. Then, when you had kind of got that mesh of players that had stayed in the system and were good, recruits that were going to be blended with freshmen that were very talented, that were going to be complemented by older transfers. Started to see all those things sort of blend together in their 31-8 national title season. And then last year, they were even better. 37-3, 18-2, dominant. It's difficult to keep those things going year over year. Obviously, there's going to be dips. There's going to be rising and falling when it comes to production from your guys. This may be the year that UConn takes a step back. It honestly probably is, because they may be losing just a little too much. But you see how you build it here. You see how Pope and Kentucky need to do it. There's not one specific way to do it. It's not You go out and get a bunch of one and dones, and you try and out-talent everybody. You try and out-athlete everybody. It's not about getting the most experienced transfer portal pieces. You don't go out and get a bunch of former 3 or 4 star players that have been at their previous schools for 4 or 5 years, which is why I have my reservations about what the ceiling is for this team this season, by the way. The only reason I'm very excited about them is from a personnel standpoint, from a numbers perspective. They check all of the boxes, right, for what Pope wants to do, score points. And it's not necessarily about just getting random guys in, 4 or 5 stars, and having them develop over the course of 4 years. It's a blend of all 3. You have to be able to mix and match with your roster. It's not a specific thing that defines success. I think something else that also defines success is how you run your program, not from an X's and O's perspective, not from what you do on the court, which that is very important, but how you do it behind the scenes, so to speak. How do you carry yourself? How do you teach your kids to act? What's their work ethic like? How do they interact with their groups of friends and groups of peers on a day-to-day basis? You need to cultivate a good culture, a positive culture, a work-first culture. People like Dan Hurley have done that. I think Mark Pope, bit of a different personality, but I think with the right recruiting, he can start to blend these rosters together, right? You get 5 guys back next season. A lot of them are really good. Really like Garrison, really like Perry, really like Noah and Chandler, right? Blend them with some high-profile freshmen. Moreno, who would end up being probably your backup center next year. You have guys like Jasper Johnson, who Kentucky is not out of the race for yet. That would be phenomenal in Kentucky's backcourt or at shooting guard for UK next season. You start to blend, maybe get a transfer wing, maybe get a transfer point guard to help boost the depth there. And you start to blend together an even better roster in 2025, 2026. You start to have some even more expectations. Who knows? Maybe Kentucky wins it all this year. I don't know. And I'm not going to walk back, by the way, if that happens. The recipe for success is a bunch of transfer portal kids. I think all of you would agree, by the way. It's not the recipe for success. Again, has to be a blend. Get your guys in 2025. Get the guys that fit, that are talented. You don't have to take a ton. Take 3. And I think you really start to see some positive things next season. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at @LanceDawe_ and follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.